a prepaid debit call from
Oh no.
An inmate at the correctional institution.
To accept this call, press 0.
Welcome to another episode of the RANT podcast. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Rodriguez, and we got my other co-host here, C's. So
What's good, y'all? It's
we got
Caesar.
Caesar Santa Maria, man. That's the man. So check this out, guys. We have an amazing episode for you today, and it's centered around something that we both kind of feel very strongly about, considering that we've been through it. But essentially, right, we want to talk about burnout, right? We want to talk about this shift in attitude towards jobs that a lot of Americans have been feeling, and this might be a thing around the world, but we know for sure that it's happening here at home, and so we want to talk about it, right? And so one of the ways that we wanted to start off today's episode, right, was with a quick TikTok video. All right. Now, this TikTok video does a really cool job of diving into one of the reasons why, this shift has occurred. So I'm going to play that for you off top. Let's get to it.
Not so bad. It's not so bad.
You're going to want to go ahead and hit the save button because you're going to want to share this one with your friends. People ask me all the time, what do you think has changed? What do you think has changed in the mindset of the American worker? And my answer is simple. It's COVID. The average blue-collar worker, the American worker, watched the entire system turn its back on us. You had essential workers being told that they had to go to work while their children weren't going to school, and we all got told, figure it out. Nurses and doctors treating 3, 4, 5 patients at a time, worried about bringing it home to their children, being told, figure it out. Service industry employees being told, hey, we're shutting the doors. Well, what are we supposed to do? I don't know. Figure it out. Hardworking guys and girls working for companies for 20 years that now the companies decided to close the door and do layoffs. What are we supposed to do? Figure it out. You had the people who never got to stop. Police, fire, medic. Hey, man, there's some stuff going on, and I'd like to be able to take care of my family and make sure everybody's okay. Well, if you call out, you're going to lose your job. Now that companies are starting back up and everything's kind of going back to normal, companies are wondering why they can't find employees. When we needed you, you turned your back on us. And then we found out that you guys were getting money from the government to stay open. Large corporations were getting money to stay afloat, and they still decided to cut people and record profits. 2 weeks notice is based off respect, and if you're not going to have the respect to give your employees 2 weeks, well then, what's the point? Corporate America is willing to have the mentality that your employees are nothing but replaceable assets. Well, then we can have the same thing too. The job is nothing but a replaceable asset. We all got told the same thing for a long time. You better be grateful you have this job. We got a long list of applicants waiting to replace you. Yeah, we've been short-staffed for the last 3 years. It leads me to believe you don't have anybody.
All right, man. So
Yeah.
this guy, whoever he is, man, shout out to him.
Yeah, shout out to him.
He definitely hit on some heavy issues, some heavy topics, man. But right there, he's really trying to attribute this shift in attitude to the pandemic. Right now, we know that something changed during the pandemic, right? But I guess we didn't really understand what the repercussions of that would be until now, right? We're noticing that people are just not as, I guess, loyal, right? They're not as loyal. And this is becoming an issue for companies, but at the same time, for employees, because, right, there's not as many, like, there's a lot of people who aren't working, but there's also a lot of vacancies at jobs, right?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I mean, to be honest, man, I think people just realize their worth, right? Like, they realized their loyalty wasn't paying off at all. Like the moment that I think COVID really tipped it over, but I think people really had that feeling prior. Because to be honest, man, for me, bro, like, I was on that tip. Like, that's the reason why I left, to be honest. Like, I quit my full-time jobs back in 2018, 2019. And I remember telling you, man, like, I was kind of like I was really hurt. The last job I ever had. I had a manager. They quit or they got fired. Either way, I had to fill in the role, but I was just an assistant, right? Like, but I didn't have any manager come in for 3 months, so I was running this whole facility by myself. Basically, taught myself how to, like, take over the manager role, which wasn't that difficult. I'm not gonna front, like, it's not like it was something hard. But after 3 months, the position was opened, right? And I decided to apply for it, but the company decided to bring in a different manager, hire someone else for the position. And then the crazy part was that I trained them on how to run that position, like, and no one trained me. Like, it was all just like I learned over 3 months of just like experimentally, just like going through it. And that's when I realized, like, yo, my loyalty to this job or whatever, like my opportunity for this was just, it wasn't in my hands. I wasn't under the control of being able to have upward mobility, right? Even though I had showcased that I could do the job and no one had no issues. I didn't get fired, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I must have did the job well enough to get by for 3 months, but I wasn't good enough to get the position officially.
Yeah.
So for me, man, that was the moment I knew I had to go. Like that was back in 2018, no, 2019.
Yeah.
I think early 2019, right? And I think, again, a lot of, I guess I'm technically, I fall under the millennial status. I think millennials are already kind of in that space before COVID, and then COVID really highlighted how much we weren't valued at these jobs, right? We were already being underpaid, right? We already knew that, but we were too scared, or we weren't willing to try out anything else. And kind of COVID really pushed everybody, right?
Yeah.
Companies showed their hand on how much they didn't care about us, and then COVID forced us to try something new that we were kind of afraid to do beforehand, right? We didn't have no options, right? So
yeah, and to that point, C's, right? Like, throughout this process, right, you realized your worth, right? And I feel like that's what's really happening right now in this shift in attitude that we're experiencing, is that people are starting to realize their worth. They're realizing, hey, you're not paying me enough. Hey, like, this is not worth the stress. This is not worth, like, the mental taxation that it takes on me, right? And so, this leads to one of the things that we were talking about earlier, right? The truth is that 4 in 5 Americans, like American employees, suffer from work-related stress, right? Like, so many people already feel that, like, man, this what I'm dealing with at work really isn't worth what I'm getting paid, right? Like, it's not worth what I'm getting paid. And then sometimes, like, you start noticing, like, well, hey, I've proven to you that I can do what you're asking me to do. But then when it's time for me to ask for a little more compensation, when it's time for me to ask for a promotion, right, you're just going to overlook me because suddenly now I don't have experience that I've been proving all along that I can do, right? Like, see, you were running that place for 3 months.
Yo, for real.
By yourself?
Yeah. I literally didn't have. I had the regional manager come in and check on me like once a month because they had to. But again, the moment that I was like, yo, I'm gonna apply for this position, they just brought someone else in. And again, I trained them. That's the part that really blew me. Like, I trained them, bro. I was like, yo, that's crazy. Like, y'all really, all right, that's cool. Like, y'all don't really care.
That's how you're gonna do me?
Yeah. Like, y'all don't really care. That's what's up. I was like, that's what's up.
And bro, like, the crazy thing is that, like, right, there was something like, so it's deeper than that, right? Like, COVID has really like shined a little extra light on things that we already knew, right? Like, as a younger generation, right? We're both millennials, right? And we'll be the first to admit that. And I know that millennials and Gen Z get a bad rap, right? But look at this stat, man. 65% of Gen Z and 60% of millennials say it's very important for their employers to provide mental health benefits, right? And there's so many places that don't offer mental health benefits. Right now, the opposite is true for older generations, right? Fewer than half of Gen X and baby boomers say the same, right? It's just not as important to them, which is something that Caesar was talking about a little earlier, man, right? That, like, the average amount of time that's spent at these places, right? Like, we just don't have the same attitude towards jobs as a lot of older people do.
No,
right?
man. No, we don't. I mean, it's crazy because at the end of it, I think like, where you're like the whole mental thing, the mental health aspect, or wanting that, right? I mean, we're all equally stressed, but think about how the pay average has changed, right? Like, if you just paid people a little more, they'd be a little bit less stressed, and they wouldn't need. I won't say they wouldn't need mental health, but they'd be less wanting it, right? Because like you're getting paid, your bills are getting paid on time, you're being able to stash some money on the side for later, right? Like when you look at boomers and Gen X, like high key, they were in the generation that were getting paid a little more, right? Like
Yeah.
inflation has kind of hit millennials and Gen Zers a lot different, to where we're stressed, everything's a lot more expensive, we're getting paid less. We need mental help, bro. Like, or at least help of having that as a commodity at work, like something that it should be given to us as a service.
Yeah, especially when you consider, right, that like when we think about that stat that I had up a moment ago, right, where we talk about how 4 and 5, people, say that they're suffering from work related stress, right? A quarter of them said that their number one stressor in their life is their job, right? So the point is, right, that throughout all of this, we're not only realizing that like these jobs aren't worth being stressed over, right? And that, we don't have to put up with this crap. Right. Like older generations had a completely different mindset. My father's an example of that, right? I'm gonna use my pops an example, right? I adore my father, right? But one of the things I learned about my father is that he's one of those people that will work until he falls, until he collapses, right? It's like that old adage about the horse and water, right? Like, even when he's thirsty, he'll keep running. You know what I mean? He won't drink. Like he won't just take a moment to sit down and rest, because he has that old school mentality of like, I'm gonna work until I drop, right? Like I'm gonna work until I drop. And so, that comes to let's address these stats right below. But
Yeah.
like 20 years, right? The average amount of time spent at a job for boomers, it's an average of 20 years. On average, boomers will spend 20 years at a job, right? And you're gonna notice a drop off with each generation after that, right? Gen X, right?
Mhm.
It's only 8 years. They average 8 years at a job, right? Millennials, they average 3 years at a job. And then you got Gen Z, right? The new babies on the block, man. 2 years. They average 2 years at a job, and that's being, I think, quite conservative.
Yeah, man. And I think it's tied back to like one amount of pay, right? As time has progressed, the thing that I see in that like timeline is that the amount of money, at least even the value of the money that we're getting paid, is less than as time has progressed, right?
Yeah.
Boomers are getting paid a decent amount of money, but now that money that they were getting paid is worth less now, because everything's exponentially expensive.
At the same time, because of their experience, they're getting paid
Yeah,
more now than they were then,
exactly.
right? Like,
Yep.
they have 20 years plus
Hmm.
under their belt. So they're not
Yeah.
getting paid what they were back in the, 80s, 70s, right? Like
70s.
now they're getting paid, they've gotten raises since then.
Yep.
So
And I mean, the average that I was looking at for that group, bro, was between 55 and, well, actually between 45 and 64. They're getting paid somewhere between 60,000 and 7,000 a year.
60 and
And that's
70,000.
Yeah, that's kind
Wow.
of like from 45 to 64. That's kind of like the median like gap for that group, right? And but
Yeah.
as you go younger, it gets lower, right? For 35 to 44 year olds, it's 50, and then for 25 to 34 year olds, it's about 40, right? So so again, like it's aged, like it's dependent on age, but our loyalty is also tied to how much we know that these jobs don't care about us.
Yeah.
Like we're not willing to put in 20 years because we know you might fire us, like
We're expendable now. And we know
yeah,
we've
yeah,
always known that, right? Like I feel like this
yeah.
generation, our generation just really always understood just how expendable we were, right? At
Mhm.
will. I feel like that's one of the most common things that you hear at work. Hey, don't forget that we're employed at will, but we're also here at will, right? Like we could just
Yeah.
quit. They could just as easily fire us, right? And like Homeboy said in that TikTok video, right? Like for the people who had jobs and were making, we're really banking on these jobs to like to make a living. They were told, figure it out. You got to go, right? But in the same breath, the people who had to stay, people who were working these essential jobs, right, in the midst of a pandemic, something that the world had never, we hadn't seen before. Nobody alive had ever seen a pandemic before, right? And so people are scared, but they're still told that they have to go to work, and if they don't go to work, no matter how scared they are, they're gonna get fired, Right. So
Yeah.
like you said, man, like people, like the job loyalty, that shift, like we opened it up with that shift. It's coming from the fact that the new generations are just realizing their worth. They just know their worth, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the thing is that that's where that's one of the things that we really wanted to touch on this episode, right? See, is like just helping
Yeah.
anybody who's listening to understand that, hey, man, you don't got to put up with this crap.
Nah, man. Figure it, as much as they wanted us to figure it out, bro, like you're smart enough to get another job or find something else that'll help you get to where you want, right?
Yeah.
At least for me, man, that was kind of like, again, the moment I realized that my job wasn't going to let me like move up, even though like I was able to do the job on my own. One, I didn't hate the person that came in, right? Because I personally didn't take it personal on her end, because she came in, she's a new hire. She doesn't know anything other than just that she just got this job, right?
Which is
And
exciting for her, I'm sure, right?
yeah, exactly, right. I can't come in and I mean, as much as I did, I ain't gonna front. Like I felt like being a dickhead, but like at the same time, like it's not her fault. Like she didn't hire herself.
Yeah.
No one let her know about the situation. She just applied and she got the job. But at the same time, like the moment that happened, bro, like I knew I started making a timetable for when I was gonna get out this job. Right. Like I was like, all right, like now I gotta start getting out of here because I already know I'm capped. Like it's over. Like as much as they told me it's over, it's also over for them.
Yeah.
Like I gotta get out of here. And yo, I mean, you remember that this was the time frame where I was working 2 full-time jobs, bro.
Yeah.
And this was one of them. Like I was working a third shift job and I was working a day shift. I was working 7 days a week. One paid for my bills and the other one paid for quote unquote my freedom. Right.
Living.
And that's kind of how I just made a plan, right? Like I wanted one job to pay for my expenses, but then I was like, yo, how much can I make with another job so that I can go do something I want to, right? If I can give myself 6 months for worth of like just saved up money and then give myself that runway to get out of these like 9 to 5, at least that's how I planned it out, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the entrepreneur route is for everybody, but yeah, man, like leverage the fact that I gave these jobs a year and a half. I worked my butt off. I ain't gonna front. Sometimes I didn't sleep that much, but at the same time, man, like leverage these jobs for what they are, right? Like give them. I mean, then you ain't got to give them that, but like they don't know that you're gonna be there for a limited time. Yo, juice them, bro. Like that money.
No,
Go ahead.
you on a roll. Finish your point.
Yeah, that money is only like really valuable as much as you can get out of them, right? Like if they're the ones giving you that money, man, squeeze them for everything they got, everything that you can get from them, and then figure out how you can do something else or enjoy yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like at the same time, like you ain't got to do entrepreneurship like I did, but like yo, don't let these jobs suck the life out of you and stress you out because you ain't got no other option, man. Like, and I think that's the mentality we kind of came up to, right? Because a lot of people started doing little side hustles, right? Like I know people who do Uber Eats, Shipped, right? These little delivery services on the side making $200-300 a day, but the money isn't the important part. I guess the important part for them was the freedom to be able to do what they want when they want.
Yeah.
Right, because they don't technically got to go into, no one's calling them in. They ain't got to come in and answer to anybody.
Right.
But if they want to take a day off because it's their son or their daughter's rehearsal, bro, they ain't got to come into work. They can go see their important aspects of their life, right? Where the job at 9 to 5 is keeping you, and you miss out because these bills. And if I don't go on Tuesday, I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah.
But
to that point, again, I'm thinking of my father, man. Like. He told me the other day, we were talking about this the other day, because I've been trying to tell my pops, hey man, you got to start taking your sick days. Like you got to utilize your vacation days. Like if you don't feel like going in one day, like it's okay to take a mental health day. Like, you know what I mean? Like pops, like you don't got to be killing yourself anymore. You know what I mean? Like he's in this old school mentality. Like I have to work because you just never know what's going to pop off. Right. But I'm trying to get him out that mindset because, right, to your point, C's, right, maybe you don't quite know what your worth is, but I also feel like most people know what it's not, right? Like you know what you're not willing to deal with, right? Like
yeah,
maybe you don't quite know what you deserve, right? Like you can't just walk into the room and be like, hey, I deserve X, Y, and Z, or I need this amount of money. But you definitely know what you're not gonna do, right? For a certain amount of pay. Like you definitely know your worth to that extent, right? And so this is one of the things that like I want to tackle. I want to make sure that everyone that's listening to this knows that you got to learn how to be your advocate, right? You got to learn how to advocate for yourself. You got to learn how to ask for that promotion. You got to learn how to ask for that raise, right? Because and when they don't want to give it to you, when they're not willing to work with you, especially when you kind of see it happening around the office or around the workplace, right? Like maybe they're over here telling you that, they can't pay you, 42K a year, but every job posting you see for your job is saying that they're willing to pay 50, 45 to 50. Like you got me bent. Like you got me really bent if you think that I don't see that you're over here offering all these new hires anywhere from 45 to 50, but you're unwilling to pay me 42. You know what I mean? Like those are the moments where you got to realize, yeah, I ain't putting up with that. I ain't putting up with that, man. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, this is where companies try to put you against each other, right? They try to kind of like they all this, I call it the smokes and mirrors, right? Like me and Steve talked about this yesterday, right? They want to throw these fucking pizza parties for you, and they want to let you wear jeans on Fridays,
holiday parties at the
holiday
end of the year.
parties, right? They want to do all this shit to almost make you forget that you're getting paid crap, right? And to make you forget that, like, oh, they just gave this chick, a promotion over you, or this guy a promotion over you, when they're not nearly as qualified as you. Or maybe they told you that you weren't qualified enough to have a certain position at work, but suddenly they give it to some Joe Schmo that is less qualified than you, right? Like those are the moments, right? Like C's was running this office by himself for 3 months, and he's clearly doing a great job. They're still getting their profits. They're still doing what they're supposed, they're still getting what they need out of it. But then they're going to look Caesar dead in the face and be like, yeah, but you don't have the experience. What the hell was I doing the last 3 months? Right? 3 months ain't no, that ain't no short amount of time. The same way, like a year and a half, 2 years, right? A lot of employers are going to try to convince you that a year and a half and 2 years ain't a long time. Like, you ain't been here long enough. Like, what? You're telling me that a year of my life, 2 years of my life, working here, coming in here every single day, for 300 days out of the year, right? Like, isn't enough. That's what I'm saying. This is where the mentality shift has to happen, bro. And this is where it's happening. It's actually happening.
I think people finally realized, or I mean, at least it was so blatant in our face that it was profit over people off top, right? Because the one thing that the TikTok video mentioned was like, yo, these corporations are getting buku money from the government to stay afloat. And then they still came out with like, yo, record-breaking profits for the year. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, the only way you do that is by cutting salaries, cutting your overhead, and then paying off the CEOs and everyone on top an extra 200%. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it just showcased how much. I mean, we already knew that before, but like, COVID really shined a light on like the profit over people mentality. Yeah. And in the dire situation where if they would have just did the right thing, they would have bought our loyalty back, right? Because everyone was in a bad situation. Everyone was looking at death in the face, and everybody was scared. But they just decided to leave us to the wolves, bro. Let us fend for ourselves, and hopefully, when this is over, you can come back and work, right? Type of thing. Hopefully, right? But if they would have had, if they had the money, I mean, at least these bigger corporations. I can't say this about every job or every location, but like, not as many people would have struggled, man. Like, if your profit margins are going up because you're getting buyouts or bailouts from the government during COVID, bro, like, the regular average person shouldn't have been struggling. And again, man, I think this brings back one of my topics is that like 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck, right? And I think that was really highlighted during COVID, right? Like when people weren't able to work for 3-4 months, right? I was in California, man. I saw what that looked like. Yo, we were in complete lockdown. I mean, again, it looked different in each state, but like at the time, we weren't allowed to go outside I remember a month, just like, yo, we went to go to the grocery store kind of scared, and that was really about it. And then the next 15, 16 days, we were inside.
Yeah.
right? And then we'd go back to the grocery store and get some more food, right? But yo, that 60% of people living paycheck to paycheck, bro, that means within 2 weeks of COVID, people were already struggling.
And the
You know what I'm
pandemic
saying?
just started. It just started.
And it just started, right? And that went on for what, a year and a half or a year and some change, however long each state kind of mandated it, because it was different in each state, man. But again, I think the profit over people was really shining people's faces. And you know, the one thing I got to give people, the average person, is that they found a new self pride, right? Because before we were willing to deal with the nonsense because like, oh, I got to pay my bills, I got to do X, Y, Z, and then COVID happened, and they said, get out of here, bro. We ain't got no job for you. And that was everybody, right? Like no one was paying, no one was hiring, right?
Yeah.
So
A lot
you
of
had
people
to
had to learn how to survive.
And that's what they did, bro. They learned how to survive, and they realized, like, yo, I can do this. Like,
I
COVID
don't
really
need
gave us, they gave us a new fearless attitude. And man, honestly, man,
the
it
psyche
lit
of
a
the
fire.
American people. The psyche of the
Yeah,
American people changed.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, again, man, I've always been a cynic, and I kind of always been the type of person that, like, yo, I already knew these companies weren't for us, and I was trying to gamble it all back in 2018, 19, because I knew they weren't, long term, it wasn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
Like, and again, when they did that to me, I was like, yo, like, again, I wasn't mad at the person that they brought in. If anything, I helped her, but I knew my time there is ending, you know, and I had to make that move for myself, right?
Yeah.
That pride of myself, the pride in me kicked in, at least in a healthy manner, right? I wasn't being a dick to her, but I knew, like, yo, like, my value here has been determined for me, and I don't feel like this is actually it.
Yeah.
Like, this is not what I'm actually worth. That what you're telling me.
And that's the thing. People truly understood their worth because it's like, man, first off, y'all all left us hanging, right? You left all of us hanging. We don't owe you a damn thing, right? And so that TikTok video started with the whole 2 weeks. Like, man, I'm not putting in my 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
And
no.
always like, why do we have to put? Why would I give you that courtesy when you didn't give us any courtesy at all throughout this entire pandemic, right? So now people are coming back, and people are saying, hey, not only do we know that you owe us more money, like, right, like we should be working for more money, but we shouldn't have to come into the office, right? Like,
Yeah.
work from home really changed the game
Yeah.
because people started realizing,
Facts.
hey, we could get the same amount of work done at home than we do in the office, and like I get a certain level of liberty by working from home, right?
And I'm not getting stressed out by office
By
politics.
office politics,
You know what I'm
idiots
saying? No,
working there with me. You got the racist dude over here. You got the, you got the bigot
the
over here.
lazy dude that don't do nothing.
Lazy dude that's getting paid more than me over here. You know, I'm getting sexually harassed by, my person over here. Like, there's so many things that go on in the office to stress people out. And when you don't have to be in the office, you don't have to deal with that, right? But
Yeah.
another thing is that people know they're worth more, right?
Yeah.
They know they're worth more. You go into the office, they don't want to pay you more. And a lot of these companies have this old school mentality of they don't want you to talk about what you're making. Right? They want you to be quiet about what you're making. They don't want any kind of pay transparency, right? Now, let me tell you though, man, pay transparency is one of the biggest issues that we're facing in America today, bro. Right? You work at a place and the company actively tries to get you to keep your mouth shut about what you're paying because they don't want everyone knowing what everyone's getting paid, right? But that doesn't benefit anybody but the company, your employer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let me just read something for you guys, right? It says, although pay secrecy remains the informal norm or formal policy for roughly half of all U.S. employees, companies are facing a crescendo of calls for greater pay transparency. Local, regional, and national governments across the globe are enacting laws designed to increase the visibility of pay practices, right? Now, what does that mean? Right? That means that first off, like a lot of places, I mean, like, that's a way of getting equity, right? Like one of the best ways to get equity and one of the biggest ways of like closing the payment gap between men and women, right? Different races, marginalized groups, all these different things, like, right? Because not everybody's getting paid the same, right? Historically, women don't get paid the same as men.
Yeah.
Right? But what changes that? What would change that? Pay transparency, right? Because if I know that I'm getting paid the least amount of money at work, then like we got an issue, my dog. Like we got something to talk about. And this actually happened to me recently, right? I'm at my job and I realized that I was getting paid less than almost everyone there, right? And it took about 6, 7, almost a year that I was at this job before I realized, like, wait a second, wait, all of y'all are making more money than me, but I work I'm low key working the hardest here. Like I'm one of the best at what I do here. You know what I mean? Like that enraged me. I was so upset because I'm like, so you mean to tell me that I can point out 10 people in this office who don't do diddly squat and they're all getting paid more than me? Like, you know what I mean? That was an issue. I go and I address it, right? And the first thing is like, how do you even know what other people are getting paid? Because we're fucking talking, bro. You know what I mean? Because we're talking about it. And you guys should be talking about it. Is that a rule? All right, that was my first. Is that a rule? Like, is that written somewhere? Oh, no, they didn't have an answer for me, bro. They didn't have an answer for me, man. And now that has changed. I'm no longer one of the lowest paid people there, right? I'm not going to talk, right? I'm getting paid significantly more than I was. And I was able to manage that because I learned how to be my own advocate, right? I learned how to walk my ass in there and tell these people, hey, this ain't going to roll. This ain't going to fly. We need to talk about this, especially if y'all want to keep me here, right? And so that you got to advocate for yourself, and you got to know when they're throwing smokes and mirrors around, right? Like when I was incarcerated, man, I had one of the religious leaders at the prison. He used to always tell us, man, don't let people piss in your face and tell you the woods are on fire. And
what?
Hear me out. He would always say, man, like, don't let them piss in your face and tell you the woods are on fire. And I felt what he was saying, man. He was basically saying, like, hey, man, don't just let someone piss in your face and just tell you some random reason why they're doing it, right? Like, especially when it don't make no sense. Like, the woods ain't on fire. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't give you a reason to want to piss. Or like, that stuck with me, man. And for real, and I'm walking into this office to have this conversation about me being an advocate for myself, and I'm thinking about how you're not gonna piss in my face.
Yeah,
I mean, the woods are on fire. Guys, I just want you to all know that you do have value, right? And you need to know what that value is, and you gotta go get it sometimes. But don't be afraid to leave somewhere. But for the love of God, don't leave somewhere without having somewhere else to go, right?
Plan. Yeah, you gotta have a plan.
And you definitely gotta have a job lined up.
Yeah.
But that's something to think about, man. They try to put you against your coworkers. To Caesar's point, right? Caesar had every reason. He could have been mad at the chick that came in and took his job, or the job that he believed he had, right? But he realized that she wasn't the problem.
She wasn't, bro. Like, legit, she wasn't. I realized, like, I could be petty about this, but she literally had nothing of no knowledge coming into what the situation was, right? She just got hired onto the job she applied for, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's the part where, like, one, we're starting to realize as, like, coworkers or people that work together, at least our millennial and Gen Zers, we're willing to talk about it, right? Because we all realize that, like, like, we have a common enemy, and it isn't each other.
It isn't each other.
Right. Like, and again, we're not falling for, like how Jono said, the smoke and mirrors, man. Like, we're not that dumb. At least not anymore. We realize that, like, we see the game, we see the game.
And we're playing it too.
Yep. So for me, man, it's leveraging each other to help each other move forward, right? It's like, you have coworkers in at your job that you're not going to be friends with or happy to be with, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, man, like, if it ain't the owner, if it ain't the boss, bro, like, don't be hating on them. Like, they ain't got nothing to do with the situation or the decision made. This is the decisions made over you and your job or your whatever you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. To that point, man, and I got to say that I had I had a similar experience happen at work recently, right? There was a position that got open. This was a promotion, right? Anybody that would have got this position, it would have been a promotion, right? There was a lot of people that applied for this position. The woman who ended up getting it, a lot of people were upset about it because, a lot of people felt that, she got there because she was brown nosing, she was sucking up and she was low key snitching, right? Like, a lot of people felt that's why she got up, right? And so people were upset at her when she got this job, right? And clearly she was not the most, she probably wasn't the person with the most experience and all these other things, right? But people were actually mad at her. And when people would ask me, like, oh, Jono, how do you feel, right? And I'm just like, man, listen, man, like, I'm not, like, what can I feel? I'm not gonna be mad at this girl, right? Like, I mean, she's playing the game, right? Like, she's just playing the game, man. You know what I mean? Like, she showed up to work and she's trying to please her bosses. It ain't personal. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, maybe you could argue that the snitching and all these other things may have been whatever. But the point is that, like, I was the only person to go over there and congratulate homegirl on this job, right? Because I realized that she's not the enemy, right? This is where unionization became a big thing in the United States.
Yeah.
Right? Like, unionization started because people realized, like, we got to get on the same page about what the hell's going on at work as the workers, because we're the ones getting fucked, right? We're the ones getting exploited. We're the ones that aren't getting paid enough, right? Because believe me when I tell you that the CEOs, the vice presidents, the directors of any place that you're at, the big bosses, the managers, the senior supervisors, they're all getting paid.
Yeah.
They're getting paid. They're getting what they're worth, right? It's all the individuals at the bottom that are getting fucked. And so, the answer ain't to get mad at each other, right? If anything, you need to start talking to each other, which is where this whole pay transparency thing comes into play, right? Y'all should be a little more open about, hey man, I'm only making, I'm making 36,000 a year. What are you making, right? Now there's a real famous TikToker on TikTok right now, and I apologize that I don't know her name. But she goes around and she asks people what they make, right? Oh, I'm a teacher and I make $53,000 a year. Oh, I'm an attorney for this hot shot firm, and I'm making $120,000 a year, right? And so she was, there was an article that Caesar actually sent me about a week ago, where she was explaining that she noticed that the people who are less likely to want to share their pay are people who are older, right? Like a lot of older individuals just aren't really as inclined to want to share their pay, because she'll go out with her fiance, and they'll try to just pull up on people with a microphone like, hey, what do you get paid, right? And she said that she noticed that white men and just white people in general were more open about what they're getting paid. A lot of like people of color and people who are usually people of color, right? They weren't as open about what they're getting paid. Right? Like, the point is that we do got to talk about it more, because you're not helping anybody by not talking about it, right? You're only helping the employers. And at the end of the day, the employers don't give a damn about you, and COVID proved that. It proved.
So know your worth, man. Like, at the end of it, I think the point of this is, like, know your worth behind, like, the value you bring to the job that you're at, and then can leverage that. People aren't applying to jobs as much as they were before. So also know that too, right? Like, before you were replaceable, but now you're not. Like, the job that I left, like, I think 3 months later, I heard that the person that took my position, like, left, right? And that whole thing crumbled. Like, I heard, like, that whole place just kind of fell apart after that, right? Just know that you are worth whatever you're bringing to the table. And again, man, don't be hating on your coworkers, man. They're not the enemy, because that's what these bosses, that's what these company CEOs want. So,
yeah. Well, guys, before we wrap this up, we got to give a special shout out to our sponsors at Awaken Koala. Please feel free to visit awakenkoala.com, for all of your design needs, right? Any of your entrepreneurial needs, they're your people. They're your go-to people. Okay. So we've had a wonderful episode. And C's, you know what time it is, man. It's time for that 1 minute rant.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Want to go first, big dog?
Yeah, I got it. All right. So look, I'm gonna just go, just come out and say it, man. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? And that's tied to these jobs, yo. Like, we're all trying to make it in this life. We're all trying to move up, make more money to pay the bills that we got, and go on vacation how we want. Go, buy this new shiny car that we like. So, man, don't get mad at your coworkers because they realize what the system's like. Like, if anything, play the game too. And if you don't want to play it, man, don't be mad at them. Be mad at the person or be mad at these companies that created this system and this game in which we have to play to be able to move up in life, right? Like, the last thing you want is to make enemies with someone that's just surviving with you, man. Again, 60% of us live paycheck to paycheck, bro. That's 6 out of 10. Yeah. So, like, you can't be mad at these other people trying to figure that out too for themselves. If anything, that should drive you to figure it out for yourself. However that means, right? There's no specific route that you should take, but look at yourself, man, and figure out what you want. If you don't want to play the game, figure out something else you want to play. But don't be hating the players, man.
Hate the game.
Hate the game.
Well, guys, for my 1 minute rant, I just want to make it clear that I'm just upset because I feel like I don't have enough time to read anymore. Right. I became a voracious reader when I was incarcerated. Before I was incarcerated, I read quite a bit and I read a lot, but I also didn't have quite the responsibilities that I do now. And so I'm realizing now more than ever that I need to prioritize a lot of the things that I want to do. And even me being someone who, I'm on this podcast and I'm constantly preaching about what to do about X, Y, and Z. I'm human and I don't always do the best job of prioritizing. And here I am wishing I could read more. There's so many books that I have sitting on my dressers and that I carry with me everywhere I go. And I just feel like I never have time to read them. And so, I'm going to try to be a lot more intentional going forward. And I just want to encourage everyone else to be more intentional about, how they use their time, how they use, their day. Try to get into things that you need to do. Because that's what we should all be striving to do, right? Make sure that you're drinking water, make sure that you're eating healthy, make sure that you're reading and getting smarter, right? Don't let all the smokes and mirrors, distract you and get you off course. And definitely don't let people piss in your face and tell you the woods are on fire. You feel me? So that's my 1 minute rant. Before I let everyone go, I just want to tell you that you can subscribe, share, like this podcast. You can find us on all major platforms. We appreciate the support, and we got a lot of big things coming soon, and we can't wait. All right. So with that being said, rant
out.